we do have a slight difference in the way that we're going to handle this, because the public announcement and the newspaper announcement both say that the meeting starts at 7:30. So we do need to make sure that we don't open the public hearing until 7:30 in case people were dependent on that form of notice. I also noticed that it said that on the door of the business. So anyway, so that's why there may be a little delay. What we plan to do is go ahead and take care of some of the housekeeping affairs that we need to talk about, which is the appointment of the chair and vice chair, and then review and approval of minutes. So Leslie, I'd just like to check with you that there's no issues with going ahead with those, is there?
I beg your pardon. No, you can go ahead and proceed with your administrative matters.
All right, and then just wait for the
Certainly.
swearing of witnesses and everything else that may happen. So, okay, good. Well, what we'd like to talk about now is vote for a chairperson and vote for a vice chairperson. Do I hear any motions?
Motion to nominate Diane as chair.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Excuse me,
Opposed?
Diane.
All right, vote for a vice chair. Do I hear a motion?
Excuse me, before you proceed, we should call Mr. McKinney up to participate in the election.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Sorry.
That's all right. Would you like me to redo that motion and
Sure.
second and vote?
Might as well.
All right, good. I apologize. Yes, so we've got a full complement.
You do.
I apologize. Sorry about that, Brian. We'd like to welcome Brian McKinney to our little group of fun. All right, so we will start over again. Welcome with the vote for a chair for the Board of Appeals. Do I hear a motion?
Yeah, I would like to nominate Diane as chair for the board.
All right, thank you. I hear a motion by Wayne Slaughter. And do I hear a second? All right, Scott has seconded the vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the vote carries. Vote for a vice chair. Do I hear a motion?
Yeah, the only mic that is on right now is yours, Diane. So Mr. Frager and Mr. McKinney, when they vote, I mean, that's so
should
it's
put their
audible. They should put their
microphones
mics
on.
on, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
So do I hear a motion for a vice chair?
Motion to nominate myself as vice chair.
All right. Wayne Slaughter has made a motion to, for himself as vice chair. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
All right. Mr. Frager has seconded. Thank you. All right. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. So therefore we have myself as chair, Diane Walbrecker, and Wayne Slaughter as vice chair. Thank you. All right, review and approval of minutes. Now, there was some confusion about that when I looked back at my minutes, because I see a notification from our regular meeting that the minutes for August 22nd had been approved. So does anyone else have those? There was some confusion about whether or not the minutes for August 22nd had been approved. And I see it here on the agenda for September 27th that those minutes had been approved. This wouldn't affect Scott or Brian since they weren't involved then.
So do you want to make a motion to approve the minutes?
I make a motion that they've already been approved.
Then I'll second that motion. They've been approved.
All right. Is there anything else that we need to do other than show that they have been approved?
The answer to that is no.
Okay, good. So those minutes have been approved. Now, something else that happened when I looked back through my notes is that I did not see any minutes for the September 27th meeting. And that was the long one. I have the findings and decision here for 927, for 277 DePaul Street, but I don't see any minutes of the meeting that we actually got. So I'd like to confer with Najila and Leslie. I had no minutes anywhere in my files, and Najila, I think you said you couldn't find any. Is that correct?
That is right. So that was back in 2022, when my predecessor was here, and
Can you speak a little closer to the mic?
sorry. Could you
Okay.
give me 1 second?
Okay. See, because we have this findings and decision. But I didn't see the minutes from the meeting.
No.
Oh, yeah.
Madam Chair, so Ms. Hassan's predecessor was here at that time and the minutes were not prepared. I can advise you that the recording of the meeting can serve as the minutes if you would like to do so. In the alternative, if you wish someone to prepare a summary, that could be done, but the recording is a recording of what actually
right.
transpired. And as long as you have the specific findings that were made with
Right.
respect to action taken at that meeting, then that's what you need. And
Right.
that's what you need to have in your record. And if those findings have been approved as accurate, then you're set.
And there's been no kind of complaint or any kind of filings about it. So I would say that we're certainly safe as long as the recording would suffice. If anyone challenged us, which I don't see happening on this,
Agreed.
particularly on this case.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, the recording is sufficient.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right. Just wanted to bring it up. So do we need to do a motion to do that or not? Probably not.
You can just approve the recording as it stands.
All right, let's approve the recording as it stands.
Motion to approve the recording as it stands for the minutes.
Okay, thank you. Second. All right, second by Brian McKinney. Right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, good. All right, we have now covered those two pieces of administrative business. We do need to wait for the public notice, is my opinion, since it was advertised to begin at 7:30. Unless there is different advice coming from either staff or from council.
No, Madam Chair, the issue that I was raising with Ms. Hassan was whether the prior Board of Appeals Rules of Procedure had been formally adopted, and I believe that they had. And if that is the case, then we want to make sure that our alternate has been provided a copy because they're helpful
Yes, ma'am.
in terms of operating and running the meeting, and it just gives you an overview. And so I just like to make sure that Mr. McKenney has been given a copy or a set of the board's rules of
Okay.
procedures.
I don't think you have, and I can send you an electronic copy.
That would be fine.
Have you already received that, Scott?
I don't think so.
If not, it would be good to make sure.
It
that-
would, yeah, just as a housekeeping
Yeah,
matter.
just distribute it to the whole. board
Right,
so that
yeah.
We all have the latest copy. of it.
Exactly. So, and whenever you onboard a new member of the Board of Appeals, then they should be provided with that information as well.
All right, so maybe now might not be a bad idea to just,
And distribute it.
Brian, if you just want to read through that real quickly and see if you have any questions, we might be able to take advantage of the 12 minutes we have until the public hearing
Yeah,
begins.
Najila is going to go copy my set and distribute it, so you'll all
Oh,
have it handy.
Perfect, great.
Sure.
That would help. So we're done with this. 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 So it's done. Had you seen that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why. That's why we're waiting.
We. 7 o'clock. That's here. And I just thought it was standardized. It's not. So
Should
we
be-
need to make sure that that's what we do going forward. And what's 7? 7:30. We did 7.
Right.
I'm okay either way.
What we're talking about here, and we always need to make sure that nothing is held in confidence up here. But what we're talking about is the start time of the meeting. So I'm okay either way, 7 or 7:30, but we ought to standardize it. I believe all the other meetings begin at 7 o'clock, correct?
That is correct.
I would recommend that we start at 7 o'clock on
Yeah.
a
What is it-
regular
I guess My
basis.
question would be, what does it take to make sure that that happens, that gets standardized? Do we have to change anything other than the notification before the meeting?
No.
Is that it?
No, my understanding is that we would not have to change anything because the times are not
That's fine.
in the code book, so. it would
That's
just be-
correct. No, you just would have your meetings at 7. The notices that are published would say 7.
Right.
And of course, that's the commencement of the meeting, not necessarily the point in time at which any particular matter will be addressed by the board.
Do we need to hold a motion for that?
I don't think so. No. Yes,
So you still care in the policy statement and the procedure statement. So
yeah, I,
I did say 7:30, so
in the rules for the,
the rule thing for the committee, for
I didn't realize that.
the policies. We just went through this whole thing.
I didn't realize that. So was the commission, the planning commission planning to change their time?
We did already, we did back in the summer,
And you changed it to 7?
and that time, you know, said, will be 7 o'clock. That's not, I heard of it. 7:30.
Okay. Brian, you can keep that if you wrote anything on it.
Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you.
you
I'm
have
just
mine?
gonna look through this real. Yeah, actually, Brian needs the updated one because the one I have is just a draft, I think. Is it? Let me see. Let me see the, Yeah, because this one is more formal and has more information.
They're different.
Yeah. Let's, Here, let's take care of that right now.
That works too.
That works for me. All right.
Uh,
It probably also helps to have footnotes on the bottom with the date of publication.
We can add that to our form if you would like. When you revisit them, we can just
Yeah.
put a revised as of, or
I think that would be
Sure.
really helpful. All right. Sheila, did you get a notification from anyone that they were planning to appear at the notice tonight? I mean, we're still not going to start early, but did you get any notifications? I'm just curious.
So, other than Mr. Dan Barnett's, that's the only person I got a call from, but anyone, no one else.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. We'll still wait. So let's all read through these real quickly and take advantage of the time and see if we have any questions. I have a question. In 2.4, it says all meetings shall be recorded and the recordings may be accepted as an official record.
Mhm.
Thanks. So that's where we got that. Until the minutes are prepared and approved by the board.
correct.
There was a time when the board members ourselves did the minutes, but my understanding is that we're not doing that anymore, right?
It's my understanding staff currently prepares the minutes.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure that was clear in my mind because it
Yeah, no,
it
that-
had been changed.
That had been changed.
Okay, good.
And when we say prepared by the board, that's a delegable duty by the board. So the board can say, I appoint the minute taker. So
Okay,
it doesn't mean that a board member physically has to do it himself
Okay.
or herself.
great. Thank you. I had a question about 5.2.
Mhm.
We've never had to set a reasonable time limit on anyone. I would imagine that could be changed depending on how many people we had that wanted to testify in a particular case.
Yeah, so, and this can change depending upon obviously what's being presented to the board, because some things are more contentious than others. And the standards are different with
Mhm.
respect to certain hearings and certain
Mhm.
types of hearings that the board is empowered to consider. And so one of the, most boards will have sort of a predetermined time period, which doesn't necessarily apply to the applicant or to staff, but it would apply to other public testimony, and it's in the board's discretion. And so, for example, if people start repeating things that have already been said and absorbed by the board, you can advise the person who is making the comment that, you've already received that comment. And if they'd like to make any additional comments or
Different,
testimony,
right.
then they can do so. The board has different types of hearings, and the hearing that you have this evening on the special exception falls within the quasi judicial category. And that means that members of the public have the opportunity to cross-examine the applicant if this is a contested matter. And so then you do need to keep an eye on things particularly carefully in terms of how much time is absorbed, whether the questions are pertinent. Obviously, this is not a court of law, so you don't have the rules of evidence and our more formal structure that we do in court. But, certainly being polite, being direct, actually engaging in cross-examination as opposed to speechifying. Those are all things that are within this board's power to control.
Okay,
So,
but we do not need to set a time right now. that
no,
would
you
be
do not.
favored. Okay. Wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Certainly. The other thing, actually, when you're finished reviewing these, let me know, because I did want to say something that's apropos special exceptions, which is something that you're hearing this evening, just to make sure everybody on the board is mindful of the particular context of what a special exception is. So after you've looked through these, let me know and I'll speak to that.
I think that'll be helpful, and I'd like to start the meeting off at 7:30 with that, so that
Certainly.
anyone who's interested can listen as well. And Jess, is there anyone on the Zoom meeting? Okay, thank you. Do you have any questions?
Grab my coffee.
Pardon?
May I excuse myself to grab my coffee?
Yeah, it's right there. Go. You got 2 minutes. Thanks, Jack.
It's against the rules.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Were there any questions about the overall procedures?
So far, no, man, everything is progressively being addressed that I had questions too.
Okay,
And then with her opening statement that you have asked for,
Okay.
that's definitely going to be. Yes, ma'am.
all right, great. Will be 7:30 in approximately now. All right, so what I'd like to do is open the public hearing part of our meeting. If anyone is planning on testifying, and that would include Dan and Kristen and Leslie and Najila, could you please stand? I'm going to administer the following oath, or Dan, you can sit if you'd like. Do you solemnly swear, Kristen? Thank you. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under the penalties of perjury that the response given and the statements made by you in these proceedings will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth? If so, state, I do.
I do.
All right, thank you very much. Appreciate this. All right, we are now introducing the case of the Chesterton Academy of the Annunciation. And the request pertains to use, a variance, special exception, variance. Thank you, sorry. Let me get this straight. Special exception to the use in an industrial park by Chesterton Academy. All right. And Leslie, you said that you would like to give us some special information about special exceptions.
Yeah, so this is a framework for the board to keep in mind. A special exception is a permitted use in the zone. It's already been determined to be by the legislative body, in this case, the commissioners, have already determined that this is a permissible use. It's a little bit of a sort of a use plus. And so what the board's obligation, the Board of Appeals obligation is to consider whether the impact of this use in this particular location is more burdensome or onerous than it would be anywhere else within the zone. And that gets a little bit confusing. So what it really means is that if the use here doesn't have some peculiarly adverse impact on the surrounding neighborhood in this particular location that's different from the use anywhere else in the IP zone, then it has to be approved. It's not a discretionary matter.
Okay,
And so what you have before you are checklists of things that you can consider, and Najila will go through that during staff comments, but these are the ways in which you evaluate whether the use in fact is appropriate in this specific location and is no more burdensome in this location than it would be anywhere else in the IP zone.
okay. And thank you for explaining that, because I was kind of racking my head. I don't know about anybody else, but I was racking my head this afternoon, going through the code book, trying to figure out what the actual context of it was, because it was a little confusing to me. So
Yeah, it
don't know
is.
if
And
that's-
it's basically, it's a Court of Appeals decision called Schultz versus Pritz. It's been around forever, but that's pretty much the case law that laid down the analysis that you undergo in evaluating a special exception.
okay, good, because it did seem to be a permitted use. All right, great. Well, that helps a lot. Najila, would you like to lay out the recommendations that you've made?
Yeah, sure. So I can give you a little bit more background. This case involves a special exception request from the applicant who wishes to occupy a unit at 17750 Creamery Road for the Chesterton Academy of the Annunciation. The property is located in the Industrial Park zoning district. And the school is a Maryland-approved private school with the potential capacity of up to 30 students, as mentioned as in the applicant's letter to the Board of Appeals dated February 5, 2024. The applicant applied for a zoning permit in December 2023 with the intention to occupy a unit A2 until December 2024. But then the planning department informed that this would be a special exception use based on the town code. And in the request of Board of Appeals approval, they indicated that transportation would be facilitated through a carpool system. No facilities such as water, sewer, trash, etc. are required since they're already in place. The site is about 0.2 miles away from the nearest residential zone, and traffic conditions are expected to not change significantly based on the applicant's description of the school and their carpooling system. I have here a zoning map of the town. This is what's been included in the comprehensive plan, the 2015 comprehensive plan. And the, well, it's kind of hard to see, but the white portion with dots, that's industrial park. And that's where IP is located, or this particular property is located. So given that given the description that applicant provided of the school's daily schedule and the number of trips weekly, it's been determined that it would be a compatible use of the property. So that's based on what the applicant has described. So staff suggests approval of this use for now. Yeah.
Okay. All right, did you get a chance to go over and look at, I went over this afternoon and looked at the property, and it didn't seem that it would be any hardship on the area there to have that intended use, even with the addition of the 10 additional students. And it certainly seemed, I mean, it seems to meet the parking requirements. One parking space for every student and one each for each teacher and employee, but they'd be, the part-time employees would be coming in and out during the day. It seemed to me to meet the requirements. Ms. Crook, would you like to say anything? If you do, you should come up to the microphone. I didn't understand her letter. Okay. Do any members of the Board of Appeals have any questions for Ms. Crook or for Ms. Hassan?
I have a
Brian?
question.
Mhm.
For the sake of making a properly informed decision tonight, I would like to ask if there is any difference in the legal definition of IP versus ORI and B1. And in relation to that, as you had stated earlier in your opening, ma'am, that it is a +2. What is it +2? So you said in addition to.
okay.
So is
I'm
it in
sorry.
addition to office space? Because currently, and I will make my question very direct. Right now, it's listed and retailed online as office space, which is completely adjunct to what we have as zoning regulation.
Listed
That-
by whom? I'm sorry, I don't understand.
So currently online, it's listed as an office space.
But
And underneath of our written definitions of the codes, office space is not allowed to be in IP zoned areas.
then that's wrong.
Then that needs to be addressed, ma'am.
But I don't,
No,
listed
no,
by
I-
whom? I don't know who's listing it. Just because it's available on the internet doesn't mean that, I don't know who created,
The
who
retailer
generated
through the
that.
owner,
Pardon me?
the retailer through the owner of the property has asked this company to advertise for them.
Well, that's the owner, respectfully, that's the owner's.
I understand, ma'am, but
Fault.
it creates. You have two recognized issues. One, you're saying it's an add-on to. So is this zoned area going to be defined as IP?
It
Or
are-
is it going to be defined as ORI?
No, it's already
Brian, it's
designated as IP. The town has designated this IP, and under the IP designation, there are certain permitted uses. And only those permitted uses are uses as of right. And in this case, the prospective tenant
Yes, ma'am.
is aware that they need to get a special exception in order to be able to operate the school in the IP zone.
And that would be 100% correct. Absolutely, it would be 100% correct.
So I'm not
So-
understanding the question.
Okay.
So
So what that brings you to is this, you have two other, right now, currently, two other tenants that do not meet the IP requirements and would have to go through the same thing that she's going through.
If that were true, the answer to that question is yes. I don't know if they previously obtained special exceptions or
To
not.
the best of what I've discovered through my investigation, no, they have not.
Then they need to.
So
No, it's not public
Um,
comment yet.
To clarify something real quick.
yes,
Yeah,
or
The chair has to.
excuse me, not at this time. Brian,
yes, ma'am.
the whatever someone puts in the newspaper to advertise something does not change the zoning that it is.
No, ma'am, absolutely it does not. But
And-
it's false in what I'm trying to get at is it's false representation that two clients have moved into a location that have not met our requirements, that have not met our codes of enforcement.
Okay,
And
The
it's
other-
creating an
sh-
issue
Brian,
at this.
Brian,
Yes, ma'am.
the other clients, the other people that you're talking about are what? I assume you're talking about the Emmitsburg
Baptist church and a
Community
chiropractor.
Baptist Church.
Yes, ma'am. And a
Right.
chiropractor's office or whatever. I apologize. It's a health office.
Okay, there is a Baptist Community Church advertised there. We've never addressed it in the Board of Appeals. Najila, can you address that? Or I don't know anything about that and we've never addressed it here. And I don't know anything about an orthopedic office either.
Well, and respectfully, those people aren't here. And that's not part of this evening's agenda. But I think that what might be appropriate is for basically a suggestion that some research be done to determine what has happened
And
with
whether-
respect to prior special exceptions
Yes, ma'am.
or not, because nobody sitting in this room right now can answer that question.
Correct.
So, but I think
So-
looking into it is a great idea.
All right. So that's something that we should ask Najila to do, or the town of Emmitsburg to
Sure.
do for the future. So we will certainly do that.
Yeah, and unfortunately, real estate brokers just get a little excited and they're going to do what they do, and we
Absolutely.
can't police everybody. I mean, but what we can do is, give the people that follow the rules the opportunity to have their application presented and fairly ruled upon.
Right.
I wanted to make this transparent
Sure.
prior to our vote so that
Mhm.
it keeps her from having to come back to be either reassessed overall
Well,
as the property.
the
or just that
the decision that we make on this
Stays
is
with
not
us.
going to be
It's
influenced
binding,
by-
yeah.
Exactly.
by any kind of further research that's done on anything else. Those cases would be looked at differently. So
Respectfully.
I
that's-
think,
yes,
so I think we're in good shape here. All right.
There was something that was stated that I don't understand. Can I
Okay.
Ask about it.
Absolutely, Scott. Yeah.
So when I looked at the ordinance, the permitted uses are defined in 17.24.010.
Mhm.
And the uses under 010 are warehouse and storage and light or heavy industrial uses, or office research or industrial.
Mhm.
And so I'm not sure if this is what you meant, but it sounded like you didn't think that ORI was subordinated to industrial park, that they were different.
They,
That there's a recognized deference. Yes.
Yes.
Yes, there's a.
There is a
deference.
recognized difference,
Yes, sir.
Right,
but
and
the
it's in
other
the code.
thing that, and Ms. Powell, you're the expert, so I'm not questioning your statement about if the school is no more burdensome in this location than anywhere else, we just go forward. I mean, it has to be approved.
That's correct, but you should make the underlying findings that that is in fact the case.
I agree. And that's where I'm going, because if you look at the ordinances, there are requirements that are underlying requirements that if they're met, then the school can operate in that location. And so, for example, also in .010, it talks about the location, size, and character of a school. It doesn't mention school, but it talks about anyone who takes up residency in the IP district.
Mhm.
They're compared in size and character, and whether or not that size of the business and character of the business would be found offensive to the occupants, the current occupants of the industrial park. And what I'm getting at is, on that basis, the school is not going to be offensive to anybody in the industrial park.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And that's the essence of what we're looking at, whether it would be a problem to have this use in this district. And it appears that it would not be a problem at all. The impact of this would not be burdensome.
Nor would it be inappropriate, which is another statement that's made in 17.24.
Right.
010.
Right.
So my point is, if the business tonight is to approve this, we've got everything we need to approve it. And if there are questions about the legitimacy of anyone else in the industrial park right now, isn't that a separate issue?
Yes.
Absolutely,
Yes, that is.
absolutely. That has no bearing on this evening's hearing.
Mhm.
And
Nor
if
should
you
it
look
be.
at page 4 of the staff report that Najila gave you, it provides the codified guidelines
Yeah.
for evaluating special exception uses. And so when you look at that, it talks about the things that you consider, the orderly growth of the neighborhood and community. And if there's no basis to find that this would have an adverse impact on that, then you can so find the most appropriate use of the land and structure. Facilities for water, sewer, trash, and disposal. And at this point, of course, we haven't heard any other testimony.
Right. At this
And
point, right.
at this point, right, but they're, based on what has been reported by staff, it indicates that those facilities are all adequate and the use would be appropriate in this location, particularly given the limitation of staff and the number of students that they're talking about for this 1-year period. And so you would go through each of these items to see if anything, basically elicited some concern on your part with respect to the propriety of permitting this use. And so when I was talking at the beginning of the hearing about it's a permitted use plus means that you have to look at the Board of Commissioners have already said, yeah, this is okay as long as these other criteria are met.
And you are referring to the 14 criteria that are listed in the report.
Yes, ma'am.
And I've gone through these, certainly. The 14 that are listed here, I don't see any issue with any of those.
Right, but I think that it is important for you to call the question with respect to other testimony or to have any other testimony that members of
Could
the
have a
public-
bearing.
Right, exactly. And then
Mhm.
you can go through and evaluate, make a motion, and then make your findings, and those will all be reflected in the minutes and the decision of the Board of Appeals, which would be drafted by Najila based on the motion and findings and signed by you, Madam Chair.
Correct. All right, at this time, I'd like to call for any other witness testimony.
Ms. Diane, may
Oh.
may I ask one more question, please?
Hold tight, please. Yes, go ahead,
Yes,
Brian.
ma'am. After our discussion, this has raised one question that I think should be addressed tonight for future reference, and I understand future is future and we shouldn't be dealing with it, but it inevitably raises one concern that I foresee, which is if a heavy industrial company moves into the same office complex and they're storing 60,000 gallons of fuel, or
Brian,
say they're wanting to. do
Brian.
that.
I think maybe we can take this up at another time because it really doesn't have any bearing on this particular case that we've got to decide tonight. The ability of this business to operate.
But
in the
ma'am,
in-
how can you make a conscious and informed decision when you have a company that wants to move in, say, a lab company wants to move in, and now you have a school right next to a lab company?
That is,
Well,
that
yeah,
is,
should
That's
be addressed
purely
with-
hypothetical.
It's a
and- and-
hypothetical.
Yeah, I
because
know, and
it's-
that's,
right.
that,
It's exactly what that area was zoned for, though.
well, I don't think it's been zoned for hazardous materials. I mean, everything has to be operated and done in compliance with state and federal laws. And
Yes, ma'am.
at this point in time, there is no indication that what the applicant is requesting, subject of course to other people's testimony regarding it, that poses an issue in this particular area, and it's already been deemed
Fair
to
enough.
be a permitted,
Yes,
a
Fair enough.
excuse me, a permitted use if it meets these criteria.
Right. So we
And there
can,
is criteria in our ordinances.
Right.
It says for ORI, whoever moves in has to be compatible with research, professional, or business office.
Mhm.
Okay, and under the other one, it basically says one business can't be offensive to the other.
Mhm.
That's offensive.
Agreed. And
Right.
so maybe they don't get to come in if it's offensive to the other
So
people.
who stays, who goes? And this is something that I'm trying to say, I think needs to be not dealt with tonight. Absolutely, I agree with all of you. But this is something that needs to be addressed as well through our research that we have said tonight that we need to do.
With all
Okay.
due respect, though, I kind of believe that there is a job that the town and the county play in all of this, and that those issues are going to get addressed.
But by the
Okay.
people that have the authority to address them.
Exactly.
not
Yeah.
not by us tonight. So I'd like to call now for any witness testimony from the public. Dan, I believe you wanted to speak on behalf, so if you'd come to the microphone, announce your name and address, and then state your case, please.
Evening. My name is Dan Gonis. I'm a town resident. And for disclosure, I'm also a member of the planning commission. I will look at this thing, and I want to appreciate Ms. Crook for her comments and stuff, and going through her reply, or her letter. Couple of things raised a question to me. And maybe because I've been looking at Mother Seton for so bloody long, and those cars parked out there at dismissal time. The one that concerns me, when we approved this property several years ago, as I recall, it was set as a 6-space per unit parking. Trying to look for America, I could not find the paperwork real quick, going through my files this evening. And which with her current spring listing, she's okay, because that only uses 5 space based on the ordinances, but when she goes to her 30 students, she's looking at 7 to 9 spaces as a requirement based on the ordinances, based on the code, 170840, 140. Which may not be a problem there, because this is an office park. But when we did this, improved this years ago back, even when Creighton first came with, a couple of years ago, when they were talking about moving into the churches. So at six spaces per per unit. That gives us 72 spaces that are required in that thing, in that project. I don't recall whether there's any additional parking or not. And Ms. Crook said, you know, they were going to park off the unused space for the 15, 20 cars, whatever it is, at dismissal, which I've given out the property in years, so I don't recall what it looks like, to be honest with you. Also, this was an office space. It was originally 5 offices with a single restroom, which is the way I assume it still is. I don't know if there's been any modifications made to it. I'm not sure how that's going to work either with 30 plus co-ed students and a staff.
Okay.
That may not be applicable to this thing as parking is, but
Right. That
I mean,
is
in my
not
mind, that
something-
applies. Sanitation is part of the questions.
Sanitation is, I believe, one of the 14. I'll
Yeah,
have
it
to
is.
Look, okay, but
As you and I have been doing
didn't-
this for a lot of years.
I didn't see any.
I don't know that that's just only because and the reason because Crittenden as a rule is a co-ed facility. Now here, being they're small, just starting out here, they may not be here. I mean, it's just, as far as I know, it's just the Crooks kids as of right now, but come fall when they go to 30 kids and so forth, I don't know how that's going to affect things. And again, what it's going to do with the parking requirements, which are set, you know, in code.
Okay. The parking requirements that I looked at were 1 parking space per every 10 students
Correct?
and 1 for each teacher and employee.
Correct.
So, but it also says in the regulation, in our ordinances, that 2 or 3 owners may join together to share spaces. So I would anticipate that if that becomes a need, that they could work with adjoining owners if they needed additional space. But it looks like with the carpooling that they
Yeah,
would
that's,
only,
that seems to be, you know, I say, it looks to me, at least for their spring semester, there's no issue.
no issue at all until September.
Right. And then I'm just not sure exactly, it seems to be right on the line there, and it's hard to say which way it's going to go.
In terms of the part-time teachers coming in.
Now,
and
as
going
you know,
out.
now, Ms. Crooks, no, she did say that they alternate, that she got 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, or whatever it was.
Right.
So that's still, even with that one, they're still looking at 7 spaces, which is, again, no big deal. We're just going 1 more than what they're allocated. But I don't know how it's going to affect traffic in the facility. We're talking about, you know, an office park, a business park, which
Right.
has trucks and UPS and FedEx and 18-wheelers coming through on a regular basis and so forth.
Okay,
I don't know how it's going to, I just don't know how it's going to affect
Okay.
it. Just my views. I just, you know, and again, we're talking about, but overall, I've been in favor of Creighton since they first came up to this group and asked about using the churches back when they were going to go into St. Joseph's, which we approved, and then St. Joseph unfortunately had a
Okay.
change of mind at the upper end, which I'm sorry to hear.
do you have any additional information to provide, and then we'll take it up?
Actually, as far as I'm concerned, because we're only talking a temporary facility here, my concern was the parking. If not so much that's going to get in the way, but if we're dealing with ordinance questions and so forth, I always like to lean on the way of the ordinance to be on the safe side.
Right. Right. Okay, thank you very much. All right, Ms. Crook, based on the testimony from Mr. Garnet's, would you like to add anything that could help inform our decision? Just state your name and your
Could you
address.
turn on your
Thank you.
mic? Thanks.
Thank you.
Kristen Crook, 215 Stoll Court, Thurmont, Maryland, 21788.
All right, was that clear? Clear enough? Okay. Thank
To
you.
address the parking, if I understand correctly, was it that each unit is about, was it 7 spaces? for the
Yeah, it
units?
looks like on page 197, it calls for 1 parking space for every 10 students. So if you had 30 students, you would need 3 that were set aside for the students. And then 1 for each staff member.
Mhm.
So if you had two staff members full-time, wait a minute, where's your letter? There it is. You had two full-time staff members, and then you had four part-time staff members that were coming in and out. So that would be 7 spaces that would be required based on the fact that the part-timers would be coming and leaving at the same time. So that would be 7 spaces when Dan was saying that the requirement is 6 spaces for that area. But there is the ability to have 2 or 3 owners join together to provide parking spaces. So did you have any additional information that you'd like to add?
If I'm understanding correctly, then there's a 6 space allowance per unit. Is that the concern, and that we make it
That's
7?
what the witness testimony said, and that's what I was looking at in terms of parking spaces required.
So Coronation Media currently, right now rents 3 units. So we would be going into 2 units. So then I suppose that would increase our space for parking. Having done, it's one address. So but there are 3 units. I believe another person's gonna be renting the one section, but we'll be the 2 portions, so to speak.
Okay,
But it's
I
one
didn't,
address.
so you're saying you're not just at A, you're also at,
No, it's one address. So they have, when they first came, they had the 1 unit, and then they expanded into 2 others as well.
okay,
But it was still one address.
It's one,
It's-
yeah, but it's 3 blocks.
It's 3 blocks of
Yeah,
the
each.
location.
okay. Well, that does change the number of required parking spaces, I would think. Were you aware of this, Najil?
Madam Chair, I think the issue is how many parking spaces are available, and nobody's answered that question.
So, and then we've been there at the dismissal time around, so 3:15, 3:30, and have spoken to the current, well, they're out now, but the then current occupants. And normally it's busy, like 5:30, that area in and out with Blue Line coming in and going out. So as far as the dismissal time in the parking lot, it's a very quiet time, especially because the church doesn't do activities during that time. So the landlord kind of thought that that whole area, both in front of the church and behind, would be a good space for us. You know, as far as I understood him at that time, a good space to have a parked carpool. So not like a wrapping around, but a parked. Now, we say 30, we might have 20 students, we might have 15 students. I say 30 as a max for a just in case situation.
Okay,
So it could be much less. It will not be, even if we had 30 students, we're looking at sibling pairs. So it's already down to potentially 22 at the most of cars. And that's if nobody carpools.
that would be coming in and out, and the dismissal time is 3:15. Are there questions from other board members for Ms. Crook?
If any occupant of that building or an adjacent building had a problem with whatever plan, and from what I saw, you guys have done a fair amount of planning with respect to pickup, drop off, parking and such. And Ms. Powell, if the use was approved, could it be approved with the contingency that if there is a pickup drop off problem or a parking problem, you're going to get with the neighbors, and so as not to cause problems, a solution is going to get worked out. One observation that I will make is, unlike the community in Emmitsburg that I live in, there are not no parking signs on every corner. And so it looks like there's ample space. I don't know whether or not that's legal parking area, but again, if we just focus on what we're here for tonight, I don't think that's a showstopper. And I'm going to qualify that with one statement, okay? I don't know if this was the right thing to do or not, but I feel like being here is to represent a community, not just myself. And so I talked to a number of residents and people who are knowledgeable about the town of Emmitsburg. And there are two things that jumped out at me, and that's that this is a win-win-win for the town, the school, and the owner of the building who's leasing the space. And having a school in Emmitsburg is consistent with the religious teaching and learning heritage of Emmitsburg.
Okay, thank you for those additional comments. Are there any other questions for Ms. Crook?
No, I don't have.
Okay, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
What I can offer you, Mr. Frager, is that the applicant is bound by the statements in the application. Your approval is contingent on the veracity of those representations in the application.
Black or white, no gray.
Righto.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. I personally looked at the site this afternoon. I do not see any issue on Creamery Road. I did not see any issue with those parking spaces, the way they're laid out right now. I talked to Blue Line Improvement, who said their trucks go in and out, but that they have no issue at all. I just like to get a feel from the people who might be affected in the area. So anyway, I see no issue with approving this back based on the fact that the impact would not be burdensome for the area. And I'd like to hear other thoughts from the board, other discussion.
I'd concur with that, Diane.
Okay,
Kind of like a motion.
I would like a motion.
Do we have to close this, Mayor?
We have to close the comments right now. I don't believe there's any other comments to be made. All right, good. So we're going to close the comments and we're going to consider our decision. And if we look at the 14 points, I don't believe we need to go through each one individually, but let's just look at them and see if there's any that would give us any heartburn or issues.
You're
I didn't-
okay on one.
We're okay on one, yes. Certainly. I didn't see any issues with any of the other considerations. Anyone else?
Quick clarification. This
Yes.
is temporary.
This is temporary. This is till December 2024. All right, good, yes. Okay, so what we need to do is hear a motion to determine that a special exception may be granted because this has already been approved by the Planning Commission as a permitted use. So we don't need to worry about that. We would just need to conclude that the school would be a compatible use with its surroundings. Can I get a motion?
Motion to approve the applicant's special exception request for 17750 Creamery.
All right,
I second.
all right. Motion was made by Wayne Slaughter and seconded by Scott Frager. Do we need to spell out the particular findings, saying, for instance, that, and I'm sure you'll agree to amend your motion just to specify that it has met the conditions outlined in the
That there's no adverse impact.
no adverse impact at all, looking at the 14 requirements. And the adverse effects would be no worse than they would be in any other area. I don't see any adverse impacts at all.
Yeah, I
So-
think that if you'd like to refer to and incorporate staff's recommendation, I mean, the town does have adequate treatment facilities
Mhm.
to manage, the water and sewer supplies for the area. You can make your finding with respect to the availability or access to the facility with respect to emergency services.
We've-
So it's best when best practices for the Board of Appeals is to make specific factual findings. So for example, based on the representations of the applicant and the size of the school, you can find that there's no risk of a adverse traffic impact and that the facility has adequate parking for the
Mhm.
use based on the number of spaces. Those are the types of fact-specific analyses. And, there aren't any proximate cultural or historic landmarks that would be affected. That's the kind of thing that you should do.
All right.
I mean,
so
your
you would like-
motion is your motion. And then what you do is the motion is passed based on the board making the following findings, boom, boom, boom. And obviously some of these aren't going to be pertinent to what you're ruling on.
Mhm.
They're just superfluous.
The wording is actually in the staff recommendation
Mhm.
that would suffice for everything. Like it says, the chosen location, unit A2 will accommodate, et cetera, existing facilities. So
You could just incorporate that
the
if you so
motion is
chose.
to approve, and we can specify that our findings include paragraphs 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5 on page 6 of the staff report.
That they've met those requirements.
Mhm.
That meets all of them.
And
Um,
certainly that there's been no adverse testimony presented.
No
tonight.
adverse testimony presented today or in writing
Mhm.
or anything. All right, so we have a motion and we have a second by Scott Frager. Any further discussion?
No further discussion.
All right, thank you. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, the ayes have it. The motion is approved as written. All right. Do I hear a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Motion to adjourn.
All right, second. Scott, seconded by Scott. Motion to adjourn the meeting is approved at 8:15 on February 6th. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ms. Crook.